everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Matadoras. We're so pleased to have you on here today with us, whether by podcast or on YouTube. We are just excited about every episode, but we always love it when we have a special guest. And today we have a special guest, Tiffany. And Tiffany has been with us before, but she has quite a story. And so we just kind of keep having her back because she has so much to share, and she's survived incredible odds. And it's a miracle she's actually alive today. Her story is that crazy.
Yes.
And her recovery has been incredible. Lizzie and I have been kind of beside her for, from court, facing this person in court to now, and her and Lizzie go way back also, but watching her grow and blossom and find joy and health in life again has been just beautiful. It has just been absolutely amazing to watch her turn into the person that she is today. And so we're excited. And Tiffany, today we're going to talk about reactive abuse. And we know that if anybody's an expert in reactive abuse, it is you.
Yeah.
And so it's something that really needs to be explored because it is absolutely fascinating that an abuser can push a victim to the very edge of their sanity. And when that victim finally snaps and fights back, and whether that be emotionally, verbally, or physically, now the abuser grabs onto that and then turns around and makes themselves the victim. And they can even do that in the courtroom, and they can do that to the police, and they can do that to the children.
Yeah.
And they can say, for instance, your mom is crazy. This is what she's doing. And if your kids see any of it, or the families or anybody else, well, sure, they believe it because the abuser is going to hide all their crap, right?
Yeah.
And so reactive abuse is like an incredibly powerful tool that an abuser can use for any purpose, including in therapy, where they're pointing that out. And it leaves the abused feeling like they're crazy. It leaves them feeling like maybe it is me. It leaves them feeling incredible shame and guilt. So this power play is insane, and we want to talk about it in real life circumstances. So we're going to just take it away. Thanks so much for being here, Tiffany.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
We're glad you're here. I am going to start with a little scenario, and then we'll kind of go from there. The scenario, the key players are Sarah and Mark. Sarah and Mark have been together for several years. Mark had a jealous streak and a tendency to be critical. He would constantly put Sarah down, make fun of her choices, and even accuse her of flirting with other men, even if there was no basis for it. Sarah initially tried to reason with Mark, but his behavior only got worse. He'd become enraged if she disagreed with him, calling her names and threatening to leave. Feeling constantly criticized and belittled, Sarah started to walking on eggshells around Mark, trying to avoid his outbursts. One day, after a particularly scathing attack, Sarah snapped. She yelled back at Mark, defending herself and accusing him of being controlling. Mark, however, used this outburst as proof of Sarah's anger issues. He told her friends and family how crazy she was, further isolating her. Here's how Sarah is experiencing a reactive abuse. Prolonged abuse. Mark's constant criticism and jealousy are the root cause. Walking on eggshells. Sarah avoids confrontation to maintain peace. Triggered reaction. After enduring Mark's attacks, Sarah finally yells back. Manipulation. Mark uses Sarah's outburst to paint himself as the victim. It is important to remember that reactive abuse is a response to a much bigger or larger issue. Okay, thoughts. I could tell you when in my first marriage, I had a lot of reactive abuse. I could even say that I threw a table because I snapped. And of course, that is the part that everybody sees and hears, right? Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah, you look crazy. And nobody knows what's going on behind closed doors. Nobody knows what led to that. Nobody knows what you've been holding on to, tolerating, putting up with. Another term that I heard for reactive abuse is self-defense. And it's not abuse. The abuser wants to play that this is a two-sided story. And honestly, when I was looking this up more and more and healing, I learned that it isn't two-sided. And you were in self-defense and you were antagonized. You were pushed to a breaking point where you acted out of character, and they like to do it in front of others, or they would do it behind closed doors where my children used to say, Mom, you would come out of that bedroom and you would react. And we would be like, what is going on? So they started to question. And I had been bottling it up, holding it in, thinking I was hiding it from my kids, but I would react. And I would react in front of them sometimes. And I would yell and I would scream and I'd feel frustrated. And it's absolutely horrible. And then you live with guilt and shame because they turn it around on you that you were the one who is the abuser. You're the monster. When in truth, you were pushed to that point and you were pushed to self-defense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what other people see. And now that is something that an abuser will constantly come at you. Like it, and it's the silence. Honestly, they're yelling at you, screaming at you. It's all those gaslighting, the manipulation, that really does question your sanity. And then when you react, I mean, I've seen and read stories of people just breaking everything in their house, but it was all reactive abuse. And then the abuser stood back. Look at what you're doing. Do you see how look at yourself? And the person that has thrown everything, like you said, they feel so much shame and guilt and just they're horrific over their actions. But no one understands that there was such a deeper issue and problem that they didn't see at all.
And to live with that guilt and shame keeps you in that relationship because you don't see them as the problem, because they keep telling you you're the problem and then you're reacting. And so then you end up apologizing and thinking you are the problem, and hopefully you'll have a better day if you change your behavior or if you learn to not react to them. So pretty soon you're trying not to react to them until you get pushed to your point again, and then you react. And then sometimes they want to take out the phone and record you and say, look at this person, look what they're doing. They're the abusive one. And in my situation, it was shocking that I'm the one who had bruises all over me. My ears looked like cauliflower ears, like I'd been in a wrestling match. My eyes were popping out of my head. The police were called, and he wanted to tell his side of the story, that I was the one abusing him. It's just shocking how they manipulate and twist and turn things into they're the victim. And if anybody had been watching or listening or really seeing what was going on, they would know that person is the one who's hurting someone else.
Tiffany, how often do you think, or in your case, let's talk about your case, how often did you hide, what was going on? And did you do it because you really felt like it was your fault?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So I hid it for basically my whole marriage. It started off with punching me in the face. And when we were first married, and it was, I'm having nightmares. I was in the military. I had PTSD. So I excused it. And pretty soon it was kicking me, hitting me in the middle of the night, saying it was nightmares. That's how it all started with the physical abuse. The emotional abuse and psychological abuse was going on for a very, very long time. And when the children moved out is when I started being covered in bruises. And people at work were wondering why I was wearing long sleeves. It was 104 outside and it was completely covered up. And until I got away from that situation and my bruises began to heal, I would look in the mirror and I'd be shocked that I didn't have bruises anymore, because I was always told that it was my fault, that I'm the one who caused it, that I'm the one who was provoking him, and I deserved it. And so I would wake up with guilt and shame, with bruises all over me, and say, "What happened?" And he'd say, "Oh, you did stuff." And I would believe it. And I was so highly manipulated that I began to think it was me. And so I tolerated it and would just try to do better.
You say there some of the emotional signs is confusion and self-doubt. You question your sanity. Another one is guilt and shame. So if you're trying to figure out your emotional signs, if you're in this situation, guilt and shame, the way that the abuser will twist the narrative, making the victim feel guilty, which you had. Anxiety and depression, I struggled a lot with that. Living in a constant state of fear and tension, which also takes a toll on our mental health. So those are some of the emotional signs. And it sounds like we know guilt and shame, absolutely. And I'm sure you felt the anxiety and depression, the confusion and self-doubt. What
Mhm.
what are some words that, whether it's Tiffany or Deana or anybody else, like there's more people here, but what are some like words of encouragement that if someone is listening to this, is there anything you would tell them if they question themselves at this point?
To not tell anybody. And when the police came, I said, because I'm in a cop family, you're supposed to keep your mouth shut. And he looked at me shocked, like, that's not a thing. So I would recommend or advise, start talking about it, get people's feedback, start sharing the story. Don't be afraid, because they want to keep you isolated. And I became very isolated. And so I didn't have anyone to talk to about it, had no one to share this information with. I was living in fear, anxiety, confusion, wanting things to be better, but they weren't getting better, and then being told it was all my fault.
Tiffany, what were you afraid that would happen if you came out with this? Like say you're at school and one of the teachers saw something or saw something in you, and what made you hold it all in and not say anything? What was the biggest factor for you to keep it hidden?
I was afraid of him, even to the point when I was strangled, I didn't call the police. That should have been a police call. Instead, I called my parents because I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't want to embarrass our family. I also was still in a state of confusion of who was to blame for this. And as I became aware that it wasn't my fault, that this was happening to me, I did begin starting to stand up for myself. And I began reacting in text messages, because he would stay downstairs at one point and I would tell him to leave, that he had to go. But I was afraid of embarrassing my family. I was afraid of separating my family. I didn't think my kids would believe me because they had never seen it. I had always taught my kids to respect and love him, and I just didn't think anyone would believe me.
Yeah, that's so typical, especially with this kind of abuse. I was reading an amazing article and it was saying the very same things that are most advantageous to the abuser are also the most damaging to the victim. These things can make the victim feel that they need to remain in the relationship because they don't believe they'll get the support they need if they leave. And
Yes.
then the abuser is never held accountable. And the victim feels confused because they do react abusively. They feel like they're, in a rage half the time. And so they feel the shame of their actions, where the abuser does not feel any shame.
Mm-mm.
They don't feel anything negative. And so what they're saying in this article is that therapists often, if they go to couples counseling, for instance, believe the abuser, because the one that is reactively abusing is admitting it, feeling terrible, sobbing, feeling shame, horrified at their behavior, shocked at themselves, and they want to stop. They don't want to be that person. So they're admitting it. And then the abuser is denying everything or saying, well, that's the reason that I did this. And so this article was fascinating because it actually gives tips on how to recognize which one is the abuser and which one is the abused. And like you alluded to earlier, Tiffany, there is one abuser and one abusee. You don't see two abusers in a relationship. You might
No,
see abuse and reactive abuse.
well, even when the police came and I was being interviewed, the female police officer asked me, "Do you ever lay a hand on him?" And I was thinking and thinking and thinking, well, let me really think about this. And I said, "No, I raise my hands to keep him from hitting me, grabbing me, choking me." And she's like, "Oh, that was me." But there are women that will hit back because they're in self-defense. And I was raising my hands up to keep his hands from grabbing me, holding me, hurting me. And it was just horrible.
Yeah, exactly. And so, let's say you went to therapy and, or to see a pastor or whomever, and he's calm, cool, collected, he's sitting there telling his story, he's explaining what you did. He's explaining all the good traits of himself, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then here you are falling apart. And so that's exactly what this said, which I thought it was fascinating, that the therapist needs to look at the situation. The person that is generally shaking and extremely emotionally distraught, PTSD, even health problems, even blood sugar problems, diabetes, certain dysregulation health wise, they're usually and almost always the abused. It's the one that is sitting there deflecting and behaving as if they are the one in charge and control, and that, again, protecting their selves and their status, and stating that this is what this person did and excusing anything that you might say they did. That
Mm-hmm.
person is generally the abuser. So those are some excellent signs to be able to tell who's the abused, who's the abuser, which one is the big faker.
Yeah.
Really, that's really powerful and very impactful, because that is the one I think all victims from reactive abuse, because I can look back at my first marriage and how I felt all those things. And I could say I was young. I didn't know. I had no academic or no understanding or awareness of what I was going through. So there was a lot of confusion and the guilt, the shame. Yeah, I could go through all that. And I think I was physical a couple of times. And that's a hard one to admit when you've been physical, because you're like, I am a scumbucket. But I mean, looking back now, I mean, I would have reacted totally different. So when I went through anything with Rex, I was just like, I knew I had a more awareness. Obviously, I had other awareness I need to build, but I did not have reactive abuse like that. But I can say that all three of the men that I was involved with, whether it was my ex-husband or when I was seriously seeing, they all three did the same thing. Well, you did this, so you're no angel.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
know, I'm amazed that they would have say it differently. Well, you did this, so you're not 100% perfect. And you're
And
like, yeah,
that's
I did do those things.
yeah, and that's what keeps you. You know, I've talked to many women that are like, I hit him and I didn't stop. And I'm like, that's called self-defense. You were pushed to your breaking point. No, it's never okay to hit people, but also when you're pushed to that breaking point, you turn into somebody you don't even know because you've been so abused. And it's just like a dog. I always like to use this analogy, like a dog that's been beaten and beaten and beaten and beaten, a dog is going to snap and react.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens to people that are being abused. You snap and you're trying to defend yourself. You're trying to regain your control, your power, your independence. And they actually don't stop when you react. They come at you harder. And when my situation happened and I was calling my mom to save me, he was texting me. While I was running away, he was texting me and threatening me. He did not stop. And I knew that if I went back into that house, I was going to be dead. I knew it.
Yeah. And you know what, Tiffany? I mean, that is definitely a fight for your life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that'd be like someone breaking into your house and trying to strangle you and you fight them off. And
Mm-hmm.
now, you know, but it's because it's your significant other, then, you know, they can easily make you feel like you're a terrible person. But if you're fighting off a, you know, a murderer, then you're fine. So it's something. And, you know, I love what you all said about how that person will tell you, well, you're not perfect, because for 26 years, that's what Rex would say to me. Well, you're not perfect either. You're not perfect either. And I couldn't fight against that. And finally, one day, I had a light bulb moment years in. And I looked at him and I said, my behavior isn't destroying us. I might have, yeah, I have problems. Yeah, I'm not perfect. Yeah, I'm a, you know, human being, but I could be in a healthy relationship with a healthy human and I would not destroy that person. I would not break down the family. I would not break down the home. I would not break them down emotionally and harm them. I couldn't sleep at night if I hurt somebody else. You are breaking down this family. Your situation, your problems are way, you know, more toxic than this. And so there's normal problems, there's normal behaviors, there's normal faults and shortcomings, and there are severely toxic or even partially toxic and dysfunctional problems that will wreck and ruin anybody in that person's close circle. And that's the difference when they tell you you're not perfect. You give them that.
Yeah, I was told, you're not Jesus. Why do you think you're so perfect? And the whole time I'm saying, I know I'm not perfect, but it was just another tactic to try and hurt me, keep me down, feel me guilty, make me feel guilty, make me feel ashamed. Also, I wouldn't leave and I wouldn't put the blame back on him. They're great at blame shifting.
Well, and both all three of us have said the same thing. It does paralyze us when we hear the abuser make those statements to us, because it does put us in a position of, I'm going to stay longer because they're right. Other people probably think I'm the problem. I am a problem. And it's just amazing that I'm not going to say all victims, but most victims go through those same types of emotional thoughts, destructive, controlling, holding you in captive type of thoughts because of the gentle way the abuser uses those words against us. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good.
And
So,
throughout my marriage, I tried getting him to leave several times. And he would leave for a day and then come right back and apologize. And then the reactive abuse would happen all over again. There's a honeymoon stage, and then they started over again.
That is really true. It's that love bombing that gets you. Boy, does it. And like you said, when they apologize, they seem so sincere. They seem like this time they're going to change. This time things are going to be different. And you want to believe that because you love them and you love your family. And you don't want to hurt your children. You don't want to break up a family. So you stay until the next time, right? And sometimes, like I said this before, sometimes the abuse doesn't happen every day. If it happened every day, it'd be such an easy decision. Okay, I got beaten, 60 times in a row for 2 months. I mean, that's so obvious. Nobody would stay for that. But you have that big honeymoon period. You have the apology. You might even go to counseling or therapy and, just have this hope that things are going to get better. And maybe nothing happens for months, years, even. And everything's good for a while. And you think that everything's different and everything's better. But it's always a repeating cycle. That's how you know that you have a problem on your hands. And generally that person does not want to seek help. They might fake it for a short time, but they will never stick to it.
Tiffany, what kind of words would you, because I think you had some beautiful stuff you shared with me and Deana. What are some words or some thoughts that you would share to those that are listening that may be in this situation or walking beside someone who's in these situations?
I have a heart about all this because if I would have known what I know now, I just want anybody who's being abused or you feel like you're the problem. There are a couple of things, and one is no one in the world is perfect, but we all want to judge. Be very careful of how you judge others because you really don't know what they're going through. And just the other day, I ran into a woman and she started to share with me, and I could tell something was wrong. And she began to share some things about reactive abuse, and she felt like it was her problem. And she wasn't going to leave. She was just going to accept it. And I just hope that you don't accept it. Doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, you don't deserve to stay in something like that. Stop holding yourself hostage to your old self. Stop replaying the memories of everything bad that you've done in self-defense. We call reactive abuse. You were trying to survive in something that you may not have understood. And until you understand that, you have to forgive yourself. You know better now. You know when to leave, you know what not to tolerate, but do not live in that prison of not forgiving yourself. You became someone you needed to survive. And that isn't who you are. Because if you were thriving in a relationship and somebody was loving you, you wouldn't have to defend yourself. Another one is remember that they would not tolerate what you've tolerated. They expect you to tolerate something that they would never tolerate themselves. Love yourself enough to not tolerate it, to not accept it. You don't stay for the children. You get out, because even if you think you're staying for the children, it is better to get out because you're showing your children someone who is not tolerating abuse. And that is more of a life lesson and more showing them love than staying. There's always an end to something, but also remember it is an end, but it's also a beginning of something very, very beautiful, because life on the other side is so much better and so much more joyful and happy. And if you can accept yourself and let go of who you used to be and accept the new version of yourself, that is the best thing you can do. Accept the good and the bad. Even though that there was bad in my life, I can see the good that came of it. And I can see the transformation of what God wanted to do in my life. And so you have to forgive your abuser. You can't marinate in that anger. If you don't forgive them, you're going to become a very bitter, angry person, and you're going to miss out on your blessings and the beautiful life that you can have. So I just wanted to share that.
Wow, Tiffany, so beautiful. Thank you. From someone who has lived it, you know, the most beautiful words from someone who has been to hell and back and is now seeing that there's a little piece of heaven waiting for her.
Mhm. I'm living it.
You are living it. I'm just so tickled to see your life now.
It's been a joy to watch and walk beside you and celebrate with you, cry with you. I think we've felt it all, right? And yeah, we're both very proud of you, I'm sure.
Oh, very, very proud of you. And you know, you're not done yet, girl. I don't even know how many hundreds or thousands of women that you're going to impact with this story, you know, throughout your life.
Mm.
It's going to be incredible because nobody can understand the depths of that kind of despair except someone who's been there, really. And if you've been there, you need someone that really gets you. You just need it. So,
Yeah.
and I
Well,
wanted to say,
I thank you both, because your friendship and your love and your support has meant so much to me. And I just want to let everyone know that you do need a love. You need to love others, but you also need that love and support. And you need to cling to people that will be there for you, that are healthy and strong and will support you. And I cannot thank both of you enough for being that for me.
Love you, Tiffany.
aw,
Love
yeah,
you.
we love you so much and we believe in you, girl. We believe
That,
in you.
and I thank you for that.
Yeah, well, you deserve it. You're a wonderful person.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
So
so,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Dina. No, you go ahead.
I was just wanting to say, if you're listening to this, I have a sister that went through, you know, a very covert abusive situation and, you know, for decades. And she still came out of the marriage years later saying, I honestly still don't know if was it me? Like, was I really crazy? What, I mean, what, you know, and she was still questioning that. Now, I believe since he's now with somebody else, she realizes, okay, yeah, wasn't me. But it took that. It took years later for the same pattern to emerge. And then she was able to understand more. But what I want to say is this: if you are in a toxic relationship, and maybe you don't even know you're in a toxic relationship, maybe you just find yourself lashing out, angry, you know, maybe physically, maybe not. Maybe you're just furious. Maybe you say things and you do things that you normally wouldn't, and you're just shocked at yourself and that you're full of shame. It does not matter. If you are feeling like these strong emotions or that you are the abuser, you need to get therapy and you need to do it by yourself. Okay. One thing that I did read in this article was that a therapist should never have the couple in there together for the gaslighter to just paint a whole picture and then them be dismissed, because the one who's feeling all the shame and guilt may just, you know, agree to everything, say it's their fault and let it be done. They need to be separated from that abuser. So whatever you're feeling and whatever you're going through, if this is not who you were before you met this person and you are now a very different person, go get therapy by yourself and get this figured out. You might be very, very surprised that this is just you reacting to some extremely sneaky, covert, emotional abuse and manipulation. So please keep that in mind.
Well said, Dina. There,
Mhm.
I would like to kind of bring in some signs. So if you're a victim in these situations, or you're walking beside someone that is a victim in these situations, there are signs that you might be able to really watch. We've already talked about some of the emotional signs. They have confusion and self-doubt. They have the guilt and the shame. They have anxiety and depression, hypervigilance, waiting for that victim or that abuser to, have another outburst. I used to call it the monster in the closet. There are behavioral signs to watch for. Do you have outbursts of anger or frustration? Do you have pent up emotions from the abuse that can erupt in a sudden outburst, which we understand, right? Are you socially withdrawn? A lot of people that are going through abuse are socially withdrawn. Do you seem to have some self-destructive behaviors as there are coping mechanisms? Some of us, could be drugs, unhealthy behavior, alcohol, whatever it is, not just saying that's for some. And do you have difficulty making decisions? Now, I went through this, and I know Tiffany did, where it's very difficult to make decisions because you have been, so, just pushed, and Deana too. Okay, some other things to watch for. Do you have changes in self-esteem? Do you have a decreased self-confidence in yourself? Because you have had so much put downs that have constantly been chipping away at you, it also can chip away at your self-worth. Do you have a very difficult problem setting boundaries? You are the victim, or are you the friend or the victim? Because a lot of times the victim has a hard time standing up for themselves because they're fearful of the abuser's reaction. And finally, are you feeling crazy or out of control? A lot of the abusers are gaslighting, and they do make the victim believe they are the problem, which causes a lot of these reactive abuse. Wow.
Mhm.
Anybody else have anything they want to add?
No, I think that was a good episode. Appreciate
great.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
was-
all are right on.
appreciate you guys. So, in closing, I want to thank you again, Tiffany. We love you. We are so glad you're here today, and we feel so blessed and honored to have walked beside you through this whole ordeal. We know that you continue to just power through the pain and the growth, the healing, and your wisdom. So don't give up. You've got this. You're awesome. For those that are listening, we want to say thank you very much for taking the time to stop by and listen to our podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you. You can find us under the Matadoras on all of the major platforms. You can
Come hang out with us, the Matadoras, and
Yeah.
please, like, if you have anybody in your life or your circle or anybody that you know, please just let them know that we're here because we really care. We want to be a voice for the voiceless.
Yes. And we hope you have a great day. Thank you.